Look, there's a conversation nobody really had with you back then, when getting top grades seemed like your main personality trait, and maybe it's time to have it now, because growing up labeled smart for your age sounds amazing, but by itself, it guarantees absolutely nothing in adult life. Sometimes it just creates a comfortable starting point that makes people think they are already set, when the real game wasn't even started yet. And before we keep going, if this kind of straight talk resonates with you, hit like and subscribe. It helps this content reach people who probably need to hear it too. Back to it. Being the kid who learned fast, who passed tests without much effort, can quietly turn into a trap. You start believing that early ease is some kind of permanent credit. Like talent alone will carry everything later. It won't. Skills that aren't tested, stretched, or adapted eventually expire. Usually right when life begins asking more than school ever did. There are plenty of examples of this. Extremely bright kids who impressed everyone early on, then faded into ordinary adult lives feeling stuck or frustrated. Not because intelligence disappeared, but because nobody taught something basic. How to function outside constant performance. How to handle frustration, build relationships, keep going when things stop being easy. How to mess up without feeling like your whole identity is collapsing. Technical knowledge alone doesn't handle the human side of life. Someone can master complex theory and still freeze during a difficult conversation, quick with numbers, slow with emotions, and none of that shows up on a report card, even though it matters far more later on. Maybe in some way you recognize pieces of this in yourself. Not an extreme version, just the subtle habit of learning too heavily on the idea of "I'm the smart one." That label settles in early. Kids don't realize praise, they absorb it. If value keeps getting tied to performance, the brain stores that as a survival rule. Years later, that rule creates tension. When your worth feels tied to getting things right, mistakes start feeling dangerous. Not just a bad result, almost like a threat to who you are. That's where hesitation shows up. Fear of trying new things. Difficulty admitting weakness. That awkward pause when someone asks about flaws or insecurities. Meanwhile, the kid who struggled more often sometimes built a different muscle. Resilience. Falling, getting up, trying again without turning it into a personal crisis. Learning to separate performance from identity. And strangely enough, that skill tends to take people further over time. Being seen as smart early on isn't automatically an advantage. Often it's just a shiny package that carries hidden pressure, and people can spend decades grateful for it without noticing how much it quietly shapes their choices, risks, and self-image. If any of this feels familiar, relax. It's not a life sentence. Ignoring it though tends to get expensive. There's a whole generation stuck in a flattering word that quietly waves a lot. Potential. Sounds like praise, but often it just means nothing concrete has happened yet. It's the permanent promise. Everyone believes something big could happen, but it never quite materializes. And honestly, that can hurt more than outright failure. Failure is clear. It has a story, a timeline, a lesson. Potential is abstract. It keeps you living as the almost version of yourself. The expectation, the reveal, the trailer that never turns into a full movie. When someone says, "You've got so much potential," it can land less like encouragement and more like a polite reminder that something's still missing. This usually starts early. A decent drawing, a school project, a good essay. Suddenly adults are predicting your future. Imagine when you grow up. You are going places. This is just the beginning. Without noticing, you learn that the present is rehearsal. Real life supposedly starts later. Then time passes. Teens, college years, early adulthood, and that big moment keeps getting postponed. Always seems like you need a little more preparation before going all in. More certainty, more stability, better timing. Meanwhile, life keeps moving whether you feel ready or not. Here's the uncomfortable part. Potential feels safe. It lets you imagine success without facing real risk. You can watch others trying and think, if I wanted to, I could do better. But imagining doesn't build skill. It doesn't create experience. It doesn't produce anything tangible. At the same time, people with less raw talent, at least on paper, are out there trying things. Messy projects, imperfect ideas, awkward first attempts. Some fail, some improve, all of them move forward. And over time, consistent action tends to beat unused talent. There is also the time factor. When you are growing, potential sounds exciting. Later, it raises eyebrows. Eventually, it becomes a topic people politely avoid. Not because growth stopped being possible, but because expectation without movement gets tiring, both for others and for you. Bottom line, potential by itself builds nothing. It's just raw material. Without execution, it turns into a comfortable story that protects you from exposure, mistakes, and judgment. If this hits close to home, take it as observation, not accusation. Talent sitting still doesn't turn into achievement. It turns into weight. And the sooner that becomes clear, the easier it is to turn possibility into something real. There is a habit a lot of intellectually driven people develop without noticing, turning every conversation into a subtle competition. It stops being dialogue and becomes performance. Someone says something, and before they even finish, you are already searching for a reference, fact, an angle that shows you know more. Not out of necessity, or because it feels validating, and that validation can become addictive. Not chemically, not visibly, but psychologically. Constant need to appear sharp, informed, insightful. Every interaction turns into a chance to reinforce that image. Meanwhile, genuine human connection slowly slides into the background. History has plenty of examples of brilliant minds who end up isolated, not lacking intelligence, but guarded to the point where relationships became secondary. When everything feels like competition, intimacy has no room to grow. In everyday life, it shows up in small ways. Someone mentions a movie and you jump straight into technical analysis. A casual political comment becomes an academic discussion. Someone shares a feeling and you respond with theory instead of empathy. It can look sophisticated. Sometimes it's just emotional armor. Real connection asks for something else. Listening without preparing a counterpoint. Admitting you don't always know. Accepting uncertainty, vulnerability, even confusion. That clashes with the identity of always being the smart one. So many people quietly swap closeness for intellectual dominance. At first, that can attract admiration. Over time, it exhausts people, not because intelligence is unwelcome, but because constant evaluation creates tension. Nobody wants every casual conversation to feel like a thesis defense. That's where the loop begins. Feeling distant pushes you to prove yourself more strongly. That pushes people further away. Distance increases the need for validation, and the cycle keeps reinforcing itself. Another side effect shows up too: difficulty enjoying simple things. Everything becomes analysis. Moves turn into critic sessions. Music becomes technical breakdown. Spontaneous enjoyment slowly fades. If some of this sounds familiar, there's no need for defensiveness. It happens to a lot of people who grew up being valued mainly for intellect. The important part is noticing when the need to be right starts costing the chance to be close. Because in the long run, people rarely remember how much you knew. They remember how it felt to be around you, and that usually has very little to do with winning arguments. There's also a pattern that shows up often after years of being seen as capable, sticking only to what you already do well. It makes sense. When your identity leans heavily on competence, situations where you might look inexperienced start feeling risky, not dangerous in reality, just uncomfortable for the ego. Gradually, you begin avoiding environments where you might seem unsure, slow, or average. Not small experiments like trying new food. Real exposure, learning something from scratch, entering unfamiliar territory, putting yourself in situations where your reputation doesn't carry you. That avoidance creates a comfortable cage. You become excellent at a few specific things, which sounds positive. That avoidance creates a comfortable cage. You become excellent at a few specific things, which sounds positive. The issue is when that excellence becomes a boundary instead of foundation. You repeat what works because it brings recognition, control, predictability. Outside that zone feels uncertain. To justify it, the mind creates polished explanations. Focus, efficiency, strategic thinking. Sometimes that's true. Other times it's simply self-protection disguised as optimization. People who tend to grow faster usually aren't the most naturally gifted. They are the ones willing to look inexperienced for a while. They take classes and step on toes. Start projects without full clarity. Speak imperfectly while learn a language. Enter situations knowing they will improve along the way. Nobody enjoys failing. The difference is they don't freeze because of it. There is a big gap between avoiding mistakes and knowing how to move through them. Protecting your image too carefully can lead to stagnation. Same abilities, same routines, same safe ground. Not from lack of capability, just reluctance to pass through discomfort. And the world increasingly rewards adaptability. People who learn fast, experiment, test new directions. Not only specialists locked into a single strength. Being able to say, "I don't know yet," has become a valuable skill. Learning publicly, adjusting course, accepting the beginner phase without drama. None of that diminishes competence. It expands it. If you notice you've been choosing the safest route repeatedly, it doesn't mean weakness. It may just be habit. But habits, when left unquestioned, turn into limits. Comfortable limits are still limits. Comfort zones are great places to rest. They are not great places to live permanently. At some point, what feels protective starts holding you still. Furthermore, there is an uncomfortable point that doesn't get discussed much. Sometimes loneliness doesn't come from a lack of people. It comes from how you position yourself around them. Contact exists, conversations happen, but the real exchange is missing. The kind where people actually know your fears, flaws, doubts. And it often starts innocently. You get used to being seen as the capable one, the quick thinker, the person who usually has the answer. Over time, you gravitate toward environments where that image stays safe. People who reinforce it rather than challenge it. Eventually, your social circle can start looking less like a circle and more like an audience. Conversations stay light, affirmation flows easily, deeper friction rarely shows up. Comfortable, yes, but limiting. Strong relationships usually grow from equality, not silent hierarchy. Then someone genuinely sharp enters the picture. Curious, articulate, insightful. Instead of interest, tension shows up. The interaction subtly turns competitive. Who knows more, who explains better, who lands the final point. That dynamic wears people down, not because intelligence pushes them away, but because constant comparison creates fatigue. Nobody wants every casual conversation to feel like intellectual sparring. That's where the circle tightens. Feeling disconnect leads to proving yourself more strongly. That stance increases distance. The distance increases the need for validation. And without noticing, the loop keeps feeding itself. It becomes easy to adopt a comforting narrative. I'm just wired differently. People don't get it. There's not much depth out there. Sometimes there's partial truth in that. Other times it's simply protection against acknowledging that posture might be part of the distance. There's also a practical side. Many meaningful opportunities, professional, personal, creative, come through people. Trust, partnership, collaboration, recommendation. That requires more than competence. It requires emotional accessibility. Humility here isn't shrinking yourself. It's leaving room for exchange. Listening without turning everything into explanation. Letting others contribute without shifting into evaluation mode. Intelligence isn't meant to be armor or weapon. It's a tool, and tools work best when they help build connection, not distance. Because nobody builds a meaningful life entirely alone. Realizing that early usually saves time, and quite a bit of isolation. So here we are, the point where analysis stopped being enough. Understanding patterns is useful, but at some stage the question becomes what you are going to do differently, and this part rarely feels comfortable. It might require loosening your attachment to that old identity, the version of yourself built around always being the smart one. This isn't about inspirational self-discovery cliché. It's about reassessing whether that identity still serves you or quietly limits you. As long as there's strong attachment to intellectual superiority, fear of mistakes tends to stay close behind. Fear of looking average. Fear of admitting you don't know something. That tension restricts movement more than it protects. Practical starting point. Assume everyone knows something you don't. Everyone. Different experiences, skills, perspectives, ways of navigating life. Listening with genuine curiosity, not preparing a response, but actually learning, changes both relationships and growth. Another step. Become a beginner again on purpose. Pick something where you have no head start. A skill, hobby, language, sport, creative pursuit. The goal isn't quick mastery. It's retraining your nervous system to tolerate not being immediately good. And maybe the biggest shift. Stop performing intelligence constantly. Not every conversation needs demonstration. Presence often matters more than impressiveness. Listening, laughing at simple things, participating without proving anything. That's where many real connections form. Yes, that transition can feel uncomfortable. That intellectual posture probably protected you at times. It functioned like armor, but armor worn all the time restricts movement. Spontaneity. When you gradually set it down, something unexpected often shows up. Freedom. Freedom to try without panic. Freedom to fail without identity collapse. Freedom to learn without needing to look ready all the time. And especially freedom to connect without performance, without subtle competition, without constant proof. Intelligence alone doesn't sustain fulfillment, relationships, or well-being. It helps, absolutely, but growth usually comes from a mix: curiosity, humility, practice, mistakes, connection. The practical choice is straightforward, even if emotionally complex. Hold tightly to the comfortable persona or accept the messier experience of being fully human. Sometimes sharp, sometimes lost, always evolving. And while that decision stays postponed, life keeps moving anyway. It always does.